address the need for all people to be treated with dignity and respect.
The choice is clear. The choice is Joe Biden.
We must elect Joe Biden. He was there for me. He'll be there for you, too.
We need leaders equal to this moment of sacrifice and service. We need Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
I'm going to protect you like I tried to protect my own family. My own family. And I promise you that.
We just need leadership worthy of our nation, worthy of you. That's Joe.
History is about to be made in Wilmington, Delaware, as the first woman of color accepts her party's nomination for Vice President of the United States. Good evening. I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. Welcome to CBS News coverage of this star-studded night 3 of the Democratic National Convention. In this hour, Senator Kamala Harris will tell Americans why she thinks they should elect Joe Biden as president and make her the first female vice president in our nation's history. Harris is the daughter of immigrants from Jamaica and India, and she is expected to lay out a vision for a more inclusive nation. And the official convention theme for tonight is a more perfect union. Earlier, Kamala Harris kicked off tonight's event backstage.
We need to ask ourselves, why don't they want us to vote? Why is there so much effort to silence our voices? And the answer is because when we vote, things change.
Before Harris addresses the convention, we will hear from former President Barack Obama, who spent 8 years with Joe Biden by his side. You're watching CBS News 2020, America Decides. Joining me tonight for analysis throughout the evening, our senior political analyst and 60 Minutes correspondent, John Dickerson, CBS News contributor Maria Elena Salinas, and Democratic strategist Jamal Sibbons. But first, we should remember that 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton came close to becoming the first woman elected president. Earlier today, she addressed the convention from her home in Chappaqua, New York.
The morning after the last election, I said, we owe Donald Trump an open mind and the chance to lead. I meant it. Every president deserves that. And Trump came in with so much set up for him: a strong economy, plans for managing crises, including a pandemic. Yes, we Democrats would have disagreed with him on many things, but if he had put his own interests and ego aside, seen the humanity in a child ripped from her parents at the border, or a protester calling for justice, or a family wiped out by natural disaster, that would have been a good thing for America and the world. I wish Donald Trump knew how to be a president, because America needs a president right now. Throughout this time of crisis, Americans keep going, checking on neighbors, showing up to jobs as first responders, hospitals, grocery stores, nursing homes. Yes, it still takes a village. And we need leaders equal to this moment of sacrifice and service. We need Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Everyone has a story about Joe's caring and empathy. I remember him calling after my mother, Dorothy, died, and we talked about being raised by strong women. The best testament to Joe is how he's cared for his family. And how great is it that Dr. Jill Biden plans to keep teaching as First Lady. And Joe picked the right partner in Kamala. She's relentless in the pursuit of justice and equity, and she's kind. When her press secretary, Tyrone Gale, was dying of cancer, she dropped everything to be with him in his final moments. I know something about the slings and arrows she'll face, and believe me, this former district attorney and attorney general can handle them all. So this is the team to pull our nation back from the brink. But they can't do it without us. For 4 years, people have told me, I didn't realize how dangerous he was. I wish I could do it all over, or worse, I should have voted. Look, this can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election. If you vote by mail, request your ballot now and send it back right away. If you vote in person, do it early. Become a poll worker. Most of all, no matter what, vote. As Michelle Obama and Bernie Sanders warned us, if Trump is reelected, things will get even worse. That's why we need unity now more than ever.
And that will be a memorable phrase. This can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election. Let's go now to the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware, where Kamala Harris will take the podium. Nicole Killian and Ed O'Keefe are both there. Nicole, let me start with you. What are you hearing about what Kamala Harris and the message she'll have tonight?
Well, Nora, just to underscore the significance of this moment, a Democratic official tells CBS News that former President Barack Obama was initially supposed to close out the evening, but he asked to swap and go before Senator Harris to symbolically pass the torch to her. So when Senator Harris introduces herself to the American people tonight, expect a very deeply personal story. She will talk about how her mother instilled values in her. She really wants people to see themselves in her speech. So she will lay out how the country can come together under Joe Biden's leadership. But make no mistake, she will be very pointed when it comes to President Trump, saying Donald Trump's failure of leadership has cost lives and livelihoods. Now, before her speech tonight, there will be an introductory video about the significance of her candidacy. She will be officially nominated tonight by 3 generations of women in her family, her sister, her niece, and her stepdaughter. Nora?
Her stepchildren call her Mamala, not Kamala. That is her nickname. Thank you so much, Nicole. And I want to bring in Ed O'Keefe now because, as was mentioned, the other big speech tonight from former President Obama, who wants to pass the torch. And significantly, he's going to deliver his speech from the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. That's meant to send a message as well, right, Ed?
That's right, Nora. It's about 40 minutes from here, and convention organizers say the venue was chosen to underscore their belief that American democracy is at risk. In his remarks tonight, the former president is going to make an observation very similar to the one his wife made on Monday night, that based on their proximity to and understanding of the presidency, Donald Trump is no longer qualified to serve as president. The former president will say that the current president has, quote, no interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he could use to get the attention he craves. Our recent CBS News Battleground Tracker poll found that Mr. Obama was the former president that Democrats wanted to hear from the most this week, and most Democrats still rate his presidency as excellent. Over the course of his campaign in the last 18 months or so, Joe Biden has traveled the country talking up the fact that he's a proud Obama-Biden Democrat and that he was eager to restore that kind of governing and that kind of Democratic Party to the nation. Last summer, when Biden's victory wasn't yet assured, we asked Democratic voters, why would you potentially vote for Biden? They said it was because of his work with the former president. Tonight, Mr. Obama will ask the nation to make his former number 2, number 1. Nora?
All right, Ed O'Keefe there in Wilmington. Thank you. I want to bring in our panel, starting with John Dickerson. Let's talk about Kamala Harris, former prosecutor. So does she make the case against Donald Trump or for Joe Biden tonight?
Well, the answer is yes, but the question is in what measure. Traditionally, the vice president is the attack dog, but the attack dogs are traveling in packs at this convention. Everyone is attacking Donald Trump, and so while she will make a defined case against Donald Trump, Kamala Harris comes to this speech with a lot more star power than vice presidents normally have. 2 things to watch for. 1, for somebody who was very critical of Joe Biden during the primaries, how will she speak to his character now? But her personal story is the most interesting thing. Immigrant parents. The story tonight is how immigration is an American value, a crucial American value. Barack Obama said it is about the meaning of America. The challenge for her is to knit her personal story with the larger Biden's campaign, which is we are in touch with those fundamental values of America. And that's the level she can raise to in her speech tonight.
You know, Jamal, I was thinking that tonight could have been called Ladies' Night if it weren't for Barack Obama, because we've heard from so many powerful women, also Elizabeth Warren speaking tonight as well. Hillary Clinton, to hear her address, mentioning that, again, she won the popular vote by 3 million. Was in terms of the polls. She had a narrow lead at this same time, and yet is not president of the United States.
Sure, and that was a tough night for Democrats last time when she did not win. It's interesting, I was looking this up because I wanted to make sure. The room that she spoke from tonight is the same room where she gave her initial video in 2008 that announced she was running for president. So a certain kind of symmetry to that, right? Hillary Clinton started off this and became the first woman nominee. It took her 8 years to get there, and now here she is handing off in a way to Kamala Harris to be the first woman to be vice president, perhaps. I remember the night in 2016 when she wasn't able to get across the finish line against Donald Trump. I remember watching little girls cry in the room that I was in that night. And I think this is one of these nights that you could see, this election is one of these elections that you could see people really feel the fulfillment of what they wanted the night Hillary Clinton ran for president.
That's symbolic in so many ways as well as historic. And Maria Elena, Kamala Harris making history. 1 in 10 people eligible to vote this year are immigrants. As John was talking about, knitting her own personal story of being an immigrant. That could affect turnout. That could affect the outcome.
It could, definitely. There's about 23 million immigrants that are eligible to vote. And we're talking not only Latino immigrants, it's immigrants from all over the country. So, you know, her family embodies the American dream. Usually naturalized citizens vote in larger numbers because they feel that maybe in their home country they didn't have the right to vote, or they came from a country where there's corruption and voter fraud, and they feel that it's a great privilege. So now that they hear President Trump undermining the vote, some might fear that it's voter suppression.
Joe Biden, one of the agenda items that he has promised if elected president of the United States is that he would enact comprehensive immigration reform in the first 100 days. That's a big promise to make, certainly if he has still a Republican Senate. I want to bring in Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections and Surveys. And Anthony, go into the numbers that you've been looking at this. What impact does adding Kamala Harris to the ticket have?
Well, it may be helping to close that enthusiasm gap that we've talked about, Nora. In fact, can Democrats get enthusiastic enough behind Joe Biden? Let me show you a couple of things. First, let me use the word enthusiasm in the answer to their poll question. 58% of Democrats told us they were enthusiastic about Harris being picked, almost all of them at least satisfied. But then there's another key criteria, Nora. You may remember back in the primaries, Democrats told us they voted for Joe Biden because they thought he could win in November. So that political calculus has always been going on. Well, today, 61% of Democrats tell us they think having Harris on the ticket makes their chances of winning in November even easier. So it fulfills that central criteria. And I would just quickly add, Nora, a couple of things. Key Democratic constituencies we'll watch all year. First of all, the women's vote. Well, Joe Biden has a big lead among women right now that is actually better than Democrats did in 2016. They need to keep building on that. And then secondly, of course, African-American voters, where he is at this moment doing better than Hillary Clinton was with 90% support. That's about where he needs to be. So it speaks to what the Democratic Party is in terms of constituencies, and it definitely fulfills what has been for them a key criteria, Nora.
Anthony Salvanto with all the interesting numbers. Thank you, Anthony. And still to come, we've got speeches from Senator Elizabeth Warren, former President Barack Obama, and the Democratic nominee for Vice President, Kamala Harris. You're watching CBS News live coverage of the Democratic Convention.
What stands behind the yard sign of an ADT home? It's your world, safer and more secure against the unknown and unimaginable. With tested, trusted, 24/7 protection and a system we help you customize with video doorbells, indoor and outdoor cameras, locks and lights, carbon monoxide detection, and fire and smoke alarms. Now, get our lowest rate for fast response monitoring starting at just $28.99 a month. About $1 a day for ADT. Call 1-800-ADT ASAP.
Was that your great-grandmother who stood up?
Who stood strong?
Who demanded to be seen, to be heard,
to be counted?
Learning about her courage and grit can inspire you to pass it on
to the women who are next. Find your family's connection to this moment in history at Ancestry.
All OTC pain relievers, including Voltaren, have one thing in common. None are proven stronger or more effective against pain than Salonpas Patch Large. There's surprising power in this patch. Salonpas. Dependable, powerful relief.
Today, your information is exposed and vulnerable to cyber criminals. That's why Norton and LifeLock are now one. Get all-in-one protection on Norton.com.
Welcome back to CBS News live coverage of the Democratic National Convention. We are about to hear from Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is speaking tonight from Springfield, Massachusetts. And John Dickerson, she was the last woman standing in the 2020 primary before she dropped out. Many people thought she was one of the leading candidates to be VP. Will she still be influential?
I think she will be, which is amazing because she and Joe Biden had a bit of a history. They had fought over the course of her career, but she will be, in her speaking role tonight suggests that's the case.
All right, let's listen in now as they introduce Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Tonight, we've heard from the people who make America work, people who put their lives on the line to keep our country going, and since COVID-19 hit, they've taken one gut punch after another. And what has the COVID fallout done to our babies? Well, I'm here at the Early Childhood Education Center in Springfield, Massachusetts, which has been closed for months. Childcare was already hard to find before the pandemic, and now parents are stuck. No idea when schools can safely reopen, and even fewer childcare options. The devastation is enormous, and the way I see it, big problems demand big solutions. Now, I love a good plan, and Joe Biden has some really good plans. Plans to bring back union jobs in manufacturing and create new union jobs in clean energy. Plans to increase Social Security benefits, cancel billions in student loan debt, and make our bankruptcy laws work for families instead of the creditors who cheat them. These plans reflect a central truth. Our economic system has been rigged to give bailouts to billionaires and kick dirt in the face of everyone else. But we can build a thriving economy by investing in families and fixing what's broken. Joe's plan to build back better includes making the wealthy pay their fair share, holding corporations accountable, repairing racial inequities, and fighting corruption in Washington. Let me tell you about one of Joe's plans that's especially close to my heart: child care. As a little girl growing up in Oklahoma, what I wanted most in the world was to be a teacher. I loved teaching. And when I had babies and was juggling my first big teaching job down in Texas, it was hard. But I could do hard. The thing that almost sank me: child care. One night, my Aunt Bee called just to check in, and I thought I was fine. But then I just broke down and started to cry. I had tried holding it all together, but without reliable child care, working was nearly impossible. And when I told Aunt Bee I was going to quit my job, I thought my heart would break. And then she said the words that changed my life: "I can't get there tomorrow, but I'll come on Thursday." And she arrived with 7 suitcases and a Pekingese named Buddy and stayed for 16 years. I get to be here tonight because of my Aunt Bee. I learned a fundamental truth: nobody makes it on their own. And yet, here we are, 2 generations of working parents later. And if you have a baby and don't have an Aunt Bee, you're on your own. And here's why that is wrong. We build infrastructure like roads and bridges and communication systems so that people can work. That infrastructure helps us all because it keeps our economy going. It's time to recognize that childcare is part of the basic infrastructure of this nation. It's infrastructure for families. Joe and Kamala will make high-quality childcare affordable for every family, make preschool universal, and raise the wages of every childcare worker. Now, that's just one plan, but it gives you an idea of how we get this country working for everyone. Donald Trump's ignorance and incompetence have always been a danger to our country. COVID-19 was Trump's biggest test. He failed miserably. Today, America has the most COVID deaths in the world and an economic collapse. And both crises are falling hardest on black and brown families. Millions out of work, millions more trapped in cycles of poverty, millions on the brink of losing their homes, millions of restaurants and stores hanging by a thread. This crisis is bad, and it didn't have to be this way. This crisis is on Donald Trump and the Republicans who enable him. On November 3rd, we will hold them all accountable. So, whether you're planning to vote wearing a mask or vote by mail, please take out your phone right now and text VOTE to 30330. We all need to be in the fight to get Joe and Kamala elected. And after November, we all need to stay in the fight to get big things done. We stay in this fight so that when our children and our grandchildren ask what we did during this dark chapter in our nation's history, we will be able to look them squarely in the eye and say, we organized, we persisted, and we changed America.
And there's Senator Elizabeth Warren using that phrase, persistence, as she is known for. She persisted. Coming up next, former President Barack Obama speaks from the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia.
Hey there, Robert Larson here. You know, with SimpliSafe, you get comprehensive, professionally monitored home security without having to leave your house or have anyone to come install it. You simply order it online, it gets delivered to your door, and you can set it up yourself in just a few minutes. Imagine that. So take it from an expert. Get SimpliSafe and protect your home, your family, and anything else you need to keep a close eye on.
The first FDA-approved medication of its kind, Tremfya, can help adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis uncover clearer skin that can last. Most patients who saw 90% clearer skin at 28 weeks stayed clearer through 48 weeks. In another study, the majority of Tremfya patients saw 90% clearer skin at 3 years.
Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, or if you had a vaccine or plan to. Serious allergic reactions may occur.
Tremfya. Uncover clearer skin that can last. Janssen can help you explore cost support options.
Have some home projects on your list? Whether it's a fix now or fix up down the road, count on Home Advisor's trusted local pros to get the job done right. It's easy to schedule, check prices, and pay for all your home projects. So get the Home Advisor app and we'll do everything to fix your everything.
Feel the cool rush of Claritin Cool Mint Chewables. Powerful 24-hour non-drowsy allergy relief plus an immediate cooling sensation for your throat. Feel the clarity and live Claritin Clear.
Our mission is to fight for a future equal to the ideals of our founders, our hopes for our children, and the sacrifices of our veterans, our brave men and women in uniform, and their families. We'll increase our majority in the House. We will win a Democratic majority in the Senate. We will elect Kamala Harris Vice President, and we will elect Joe Biden President of the United States of America. God bless you, and God bless America.
And that was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking a short time ago from San Francisco. Welcome back to CBS News coverage of Night 3 of the Democratic Convention. Former President Barack Obama is about to speak from the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. That spot was picked to hit at the core message of his speech that American democracy is at stake. And bringing in our panel here, this is expected to be an indictment of President Trump's leadership, but also endorsement of the man that he knows quite well.
Right. Testimony of somebody he watched face tough calls and who he tasked to push back against him. Barack Obama tasked Joe Biden to push back and to be an advocate for certain ideas that might have been unpopular in the room, and he'll testify to that experience.
And Maria Elena's, how important is hearing from Obama on a night like tonight?
I think it is important because he's still the second best speaker in the Obama family. And I think people still admire him, they adore him, and I'm sure everyone's waiting for him to speak.
Yes, we see now the former President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Good evening, everybody. As you've seen by now, this isn't a normal convention. It's not a normal time. So tonight, I want to talk as plainly as I can about the stakes in this election. Because what we do these next 76 days will echo through generations to come. I'm in Philadelphia, where our Constitution was drafted and signed. It wasn't a perfect document. It allowed for the inhumanity of slavery and failed to guarantee women, and even men who didn't own property, the right to participate in the political process. But embedded in this document was a North Star that would guide future generations. A system of representative government, a democracy, through which we could better realize our highest ideals. Through civil war and bitter struggles, we improved this Constitution to include the voices of those who'd once been left out. And gradually, we made this country more just and more equal and more free. The one constitutional office elected by all of the people is the presidency. So at a minimum, we should expect a president to feel a sense of responsibility for the safety and welfare of all 330 million of us, regardless of what we look like, how we worship, who we love, how much money we have, or who we voted for. But we should also expect a president to be the custodian of this democracy. We should expect that regardless of ego, ambition, or political beliefs, the president will preserve, protect, and defend the freedoms and ideals that so many Americans marched for, went to jail for, fought for, and died for. I have sat in the Oval Office with both of the men who are running for president. I never expected that my successor would embrace my vision or continue my policies. I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously. That he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. For close to 4 years now, he has shown no interest in putting in the work. No interest in finding common ground. No interest in using the awesome power of his office to help anyone but himself and his friends. No interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he can use to get the attention he craves. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe. 170,000 Americans dead. Millions of jobs gone, while those at the top take in more than ever. Our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished, and our democratic institutions threatened like never before. Now, I know that in times as polarized as these, most of you have already made up your mind. But maybe you're still not sure which candidate you'll vote for, or whether you'll vote at all. Maybe you're tired of the direction we're headed, but you can't see a better path yet. Or you just don't know enough about the person who wants to lead us there. So let me tell you about my friend, Joe Biden. 12 years ago, when I began my search for a vice president, I didn't know I'd end up finding a brother. Joe and I come from different places, different generations, but what I quickly came to admire about Joe Biden is his resilience, born of too much struggle, his empathy, born of too much grief. Joe is a man who learned early on to treat every person he meets with respect and dignity, living by the words his parents taught him. No one's better than you, Joe, but you're better than nobody. That empathy, that decency, the belief that everybody counts, that's who Joe is. When he talks with someone who's lost her job, Joe remembers the night his father sat him down to say that he'd lost his. When Joe listens to a parent who's trying to hold it all together right now, he does it as a single dad who took the train back to Wilmington each and every night so he could tuck his kids into bed. When he meets with military families who've lost their hero, he does it as a kindred spirit, the parent of an American soldier, somebody whose faith has endured the hardest loss there is. For 8 years, Joe was the last one in the room whenever I faced a big decision. He made me a better president, and he's got the character and the experience to make us a better country. And in my friend Kamala Harris, he's chosen an ideal partner who is more than prepared for the job. Someone who knows what it's like to overcome barriers and who's made a career fighting to help others live out their own American dream. Along with the experience needed to get things done, Joe and Kamala have concrete policies that will turn their vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into reality. They will get this pandemic under control, like Joe did when he helped me manage H1N1 and prevent an Ebola outbreak from reaching our shores. They'll expand health care to more Americans, like Joe and I did 10 years ago, when he helped craft the Affordable Care Act and nail down the votes to make it the law. They'll rescue the economy, like Joe helped me do after the Great Recession. I asked him to manage the Recovery Act, which jump-started the longest stretch of job growth in history. And he sees this moment now, not as a chance to get back to where we were, but to make long overdue changes so that our economy actually makes life a little easier for everybody. Whether it's the waitress trying to raise a kid on her own, or the shift worker always on the edge of getting laid off, or the student figuring out how to pay for next semester's classes. Joe and Kamala will restore our standing in the world. And as we've learned from this pandemic, that matters. Joe knows the world, and the world knows him. He knows that our true strength comes from setting an example that the world wants to follow. A nation that stands with democracy, not dictators. A nation that can inspire and mobilize others to overcome threats like climate change and terrorism, poverty and disease. But more than anything, what I know about Joe, what I know about Kamala is that they actually care about every American, and that they care deeply about this democracy. They believe that in a democracy, the right to vote is sacred, and we should be making it easier for people to cast their ballots, not harder. They believe that no one, including the president, is above the law, and that no public official, including the president, should use their office to enrich themselves or their supporters. They understand that in this democracy, the commander-in-chief does not use the men and women of our military who are willing to risk everything to protect our nation as political props to deploy against peaceful protesters on our own soil. They understand that political opponents aren't un-American just because they disagree with you. A free press isn't the enemy, but the way we hold officials accountable. That our ability to work together to solve big problems like a pandemic depend on a fidelity to facts and science and logic, and not just making stuff up. None of this should be controversial. These shouldn't be Republican principles or Democratic principles. They are American principles. But at this moment, this president and those who enable him have shown they don't believe in these things. Tonight, I'm asking you to believe in Joe and Kamala's ability to lead this country out of these dark times and build it back better. But here's the thing. No single American can fix this country alone. Not even a president. Democracy was never meant to be transactional. You give me your vote, I make everything better. It requires an active and informed citizenry. So I'm also asking you to believe in your own ability, to embrace your own responsibility as citizens, to make sure that the basic tenets of our democracy endure. Because that's what's at stake right now. Our democracy. Look, I understand why a lot of Americans are down on government. The way the rules have been set up and abused in Congress make it easier for special interests to stop progress than to make progress. Believe me, I know it. I understand why a white factory worker who's seen his wages cut or his job shipped overseas might feel like the government no longer looks out for him, and why a black mom might feel like it never looked out for her at all. I understand why a new immigrant might look around this country and wonder whether there's still a place for him here. Why a young person might look at politics right now, the circus of it all, the meanness and the lies and conspiracy theories, and think, what is the point? Well, here's the point. This president and those in power, those who benefit from keeping things the way they are counting on your cynicism. They know they can't win you over with their policies. So they're hoping to make it as hard as possible for you to vote and to convince you that your vote does not matter. That is how they win. That is how they get to keep making decisions that affect your life and the lives of the people you love. That's how the economy will keep getting skewed to the wealthy and well-connected. How our health systems will let more people fall through the cracks. That's how a democracy withers, until it's no democracy at all. And we cannot let that happen. Do not let them take away your power. Do not let them take away your democracy. Make a plan right now for how you are going to get involved and vote. Do it as early as you can and tell your family and friends how they can vote too. Do what Americans have done for over 2 centuries when faced with even tougher times than this. All those quiet heroes who found the courage to keep marching, keep pushing in the face of hardship and injustice. Last month, we lost a giant of American democracy in John Lewis. And some years ago, I sat down with John and a few remaining leaders of the early civil rights movement. One of them told me he never imagined he'd walk into the White House and see a president who looked like his grandson. And then he told me that he had looked it up. And it turned out that on the very day that I was born, he was marching into a jail cell, trying to end Jim Crow segregation in the South. What we do echoes through generations. Whatever our backgrounds, we are all the children of Americans who fought the good fight. Great-grandparents working in fire traps and sweatshops without rights or representation. Farmers losing their dreams to dust. Irish and Italians and Asians and Latinos told, go back where you come from. Jews and Catholics, Muslims and Sikhs made to feel suspect for the way they worshiped. Black Americans chained and whipped and hanged, spit on for trying to sit at lunch counters, beaten for trying to vote. If anyone had a right to believe that this democracy did not work and could not work, it was those Americans, our ancestors. They were on the receiving end of a democracy that had fallen short all their lives. They knew how far the daily reality of America strayed from the myth. And yet, instead of giving up, they joined together. And they said, somehow, some way, we are going to make this work. We are going to bring those words in our founding documents to life. I have seen that same spirit rising these past few years. Folks of every age and background who packed city centers and airports and rural roads so that families wouldn't be separated, so that another classroom wouldn't get shot up, so that our kids won't grow up on an uninhabitable planet. Americans of all races joining together to declare, in the face of injustice and brutality at the hands of the state, that Black lives matter. No more, but no less. So that no child in this country feels the continuing sting of racism. To the young people who led us this summer, telling us we need to be better, in so many ways, you are this country's dreams fulfilled. Earlier generations had to be persuaded that everyone has equal worth. For you, it's a given, a conviction. And what I want you to know is that for all its messiness and frustrations, your system of self-government can be harnessed to help you realize those convictions for all of us. You can give our democracy new meaning. You can take it to a better place. You're the missing ingredient. The ones who will decide whether or not America becomes the country that fully lives up to its creed. That work will continue long after this election. But any chance of success depends entirely on the outcome of this election. This administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes for them to win. So we have to get busy building it up by pouring all our efforts into these 76 days and by voting like never before for Joe and Kamala and candidates up and down the ticket so that we leave no doubt about what this country that we love stands for today and for all our days to come. Stay safe. God bless.
The 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, speaking in Philadelphia, where our Constitution was drafted and signed, and making the case that American democracy is at stake. I want to bring back in our panel. And John, I've been going to conventions since 2000 for 20 years. This is the first virtual convention we've all covered for the first time. It's always been a speech about which policy is right for America, which policy is wrong for America. This was a speech about Donald Trump and the fact that what he is doing is going to tear democracy apart.
You can't raise the stakes any higher. And when you just think the history that's swirling around in that speech, you have the first African-American president at the location of the document written by slaveholders, but a document that lives enough so that he can go back to its original principles for equality and justice, and then tell the story of John Lewis, who fought for the right to vote, which then allowed that African-American president to actually come into office. You cannot raise the rhetorical and historical stakes any higher. This was the most powerful get-out-the-vote message that's ever been delivered from a convention.
And yet Jamal, too, while not only endorsing Joe Biden in a personal sense about his empathy and kindness and being the man needed for the moment, at the same time, Barack Obama imploring young people, offering hope and empowering them, essentially, which is really the Obama trademark.
Yeah, you know, the history of sort of American progress is that one generation's aspirations become the next generation's expectations. And, you know, Barack Obama, for all of his greatness, was the product of a change. I think we're going to something.
Yeah, and part of that change, as you mentioned, passing the torch. Let's listen in now to Kamala's family, who will introduce her tonight.
Stepmom. You're my role model, who taught me I could do and be anything I wanted.
My very first friend, my confidant, my partner in mischief and in justice.
You're a rock, not just for our dad, but for 3 generations of our big blended family.
You showed me the importance of public service and made sure I grew up surrounded by smart, strong, ambitious women every day.
Growing up, heaven help the poor kid who picked on me, because my big sister would be there in a flash, ready to have my back. Well, now we've got your back as you and Joe fight to protect our democracy.
And there's no union more perfect than the one that brings us all to your kitchen table every Sunday night for stir fry, feta chicken, or spaghetti and meatball family dinners.
And now that I'm a mom, you're showing my daughters and so many girls around the world who look like them what's possible and what it's like to move through the world as fierce, formidable, phenomenal women in their own unique way.
I love you. I admire you. I am so proud of you. And even though Mommy's not here to see her first daughter step into history, the entire nation will see in your strength, your integrity, your intelligence, and your optimism the values that she raised us with.
We love you, Mamala.
We're so proud of you, Auntie.
You mean the world to us, Kamala.
And we could not be more excited
to share you with the world
as the next
Vice President
of the United States.
Joe Biden has selected Kamala Harris as his running mate.
She is the first Black woman, first South Asian woman to be named on the Democratic ticket.
This is a historic pick.
Someone who looks like us on a presidential ticket. That's crazy.
Kamala Harris is us. She was born in Oakland.
The daughter of immigrants.
The daughter of Chandler.
Big sister She is a woman of many firsts.
Ella reconoce el trabajo duro.
She's a hard worker, a really hard worker.
She's brilliant, she's smart, she's tough, and she's got a big future.
She's probably one of the best role models. Kamala Harris is like a dream to me.
Senator Harris cares about people. There's no doubt about it.
When she says for the people, it is in every ounce of who she is. She's for us. She's for us.
She fights for women's rights. She fights to end mass incarceration.
She is a fearless advocate for the voiceless.
The litmus test for America is how we are treating black women.
Now, I'm talking about someone who can fight for black people, brown people, undocumented people, LGBT people, disabled people, young people, old people, all of America.
It's about all of us knowing our power, each of us, to lift people up, right? And to remind them that we see them and we hear them and that they matter.
President of the United States?
Greetings, America. It is truly an honor to be speaking with you tonight. That I am here tonight is a testament to the dedication of generations before me. Women and men who believed so fiercely in the promise of equality, liberty, and justice for all. This week marks the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, and we celebrate the women who fought for that right. Yet so many of the black women who helped secure that victory were still prohibited from voting long after its ratification. But they were undeterred. Without fanfare or recognition, they organized and testified and rallied and marched and fought, not just for their vote, but for a seat at the table. These women and the generations that followed worked to make democracy and opportunity real in the lives of all of us who followed. They paved the way for the trailblazing leadership of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And these women inspired us to pick up the torch and fight on. Women like Mary Church Terrell, Mary Cloyd Bethune, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Diane Nash, Constance Baker Motley, and the great Shirley Chisholm. We're not often taught their stories, but as Americans, we all stand on their shoulders. And there's another woman whose name isn't known, whose story isn't shared, another woman whose shoulders I stand on. And that's my mother, Shamala Gopalan Harris. She came here from India at age 19 to pursue her dream of curing cancer. At the University of California, Berkeley, she met my father, Donald Harris, who had come from Jamaica to study economics. They fell in love in that most American way while marching together for justice in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. In the streets of Oakland and Berkeley, I got a stroller's eye view of people getting into what the great John Lewis called good trouble. When I was 5, my parents split, and my mother raised us mostly on her own. Like so many mothers, she worked around the clock to make it work, packing lunches before we woke up and paying bills after we went to bed, helping us with homework at the kitchen table and shuttling us to church for choir practice. She made it look easy, though it never was. My mother instilled in my sister Maya and me the values that would chart the course of our lives. She raised us to be proud, strong Black women, and she raised us to know and be proud of our Indian heritage. She taught us to put family first, the family you're born into and the family you choose. Family is my husband, Doug, who I met on a blind date set up by my best friend. Family is our beautiful children, Cole and Ella, who call me Kamala. Family is my sister. Family is my best friend, my nieces, and my godchildren. Family is my uncles, my aunts, and my chitties. Family is Mrs. Shelton, my second mother who lived 2 doors down and helped raise me. Family is my beloved Alpha Kappa Alpha, our Divine Nine, and my HBCU brothers and sisters. Family is the friends I turn to when my mother, the most important person in my life, passed away from cancer. And even as she taught us to keep our family at the center of our world, she also pushed us to see a world beyond ourselves. She taught us to be conscious and compassionate about the struggles of all people, to believe public service is a noble cause and the fight for justice is a shared responsibility. That led me to become a lawyer, a district attorney, attorney general, and a United States senator. And at every step of the way, I've been guided by the words I spoke from the first time I stood in a courtroom. Kamala Harris, for the people. I have fought for children and survivors of sexual assault. I fought against transnational criminal organizations. I took on the biggest banks and helped take down one of the biggest for-profit colleges. I know a predator when I see one. My mother taught me that service to others gives life purpose and meaning. And oh, how I wish she were here tonight, but I know she's looking down on me from above. I keep thinking about that 25-year-old Indian woman, all of 5 feet tall, who gave birth to me at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. On that day, she probably could have never imagined that I would be standing before you now and speaking these words. I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America. I do so committed to the values she taught me, to the word that teaches me to walk by faith and not by sight, and to a vision passed on through generations of Americans, one that Joe Biden shares, a vision of our nation as a beloved community where all are welcome, no matter what we look like, no matter where we come from or who we love. A country where we may not agree on every detail, but we are united by the fundamental belief that every human being is of infinite worth, deserving of compassion, dignity, and respect. A country where we look out for one another, where we rise and fall as one, where we face our challenges and celebrate our triumphs together. Today, that country feels distant. Donald Trump's failure of leadership has cost lives and livelihoods. If you're a parent struggling with your child's remote learning, or you're a teacher struggling on the other side of that screen, you know what we're doing right now is not working. And we are a nation that is grieving the loss of life, the loss of jobs, the loss of opportunities, the loss of normalcy, and yes, the loss of certainty. And while this virus touches us all, we got to be honest, it is not an equal opportunity offender. Black, Latino, and indigenous people are suffering and dying disproportionately. And this is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism, of inequities in education and technology, healthcare and housing, job security and transportation, the injustice in reproductive and maternal health care, in the excessive use of force by police, and in our broader criminal justice system. This virus, it has no eyes, and yet it knows exactly how we see each other and how we treat each other. And let's be clear, there is no vaccine for racism. We've got to do the work. For George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for the lives of too many others to name, for our children, and for all of us. We've got to do the work to fulfill that promise of equal justice under law. Because here's the thing, none of us are free until all of us are free. So we're at an inflection point. The constant chaos leaves us adrift. The incompetence makes us feel afraid. The callousness makes us feel alone. It's a lot. And here's the thing, we can do better and deserve so much more. We must elect a president who will bring something different, something better, and do the important work. A president who will bring all of us together, Black, white, Latino, Asian, indigenous, to achieve the future we collectively want. We must elect Joe Biden. And I will tell you, I knew Joe as vice president. I knew Joe on the campaign trail. And I first got to know Joe as the father of my friend. So Joe's son, Bo, and I served as attorneys general of our states, Delaware and California. During the Great Recession, he and I spoke on the phone nearly every day, working together to win back billions of dollars for homeowners from the big banks that foreclosed on people's homes. And Bo and I, we would talk about his family, how as a single father, Joe would spend 4 hours every day riding the train back and forth from Wilmington to Washington. Bo and Hunter got to have breakfast every morning with their dad. They went to sleep every night with the sound of his voice reading bedtime stories. And while they endured an unspeakable loss, those two little boys always knew that they were deeply, unconditionally loved. And what also moved me about Joe is the work that he did as he was going back and forth. This is the leader who wrote the Violence Against Women Act and enacted the assault weapons ban, who as vice president implemented the Recovery Act, which brought our country back from the Great Recessions. He championed the Affordable Care Act, protecting millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions, who spent decades promoting American values and interests around the world. Joe, he believes we stand with our allies and stand up to our adversaries. Right now, we have a president who turns our tragedies into political weapons. Joe will be a president who turns our challenges into purpose. Joe will bring us together to build an economy that doesn't leave anyone behind, where a good-paying job is the floor, not the ceiling. Joe will bring us together to end this pandemic and make sure that we are prepared for the next one. Joe will bring us together to squarely face and dismantle racial injustice, furthering the work of generations. Joe and I believe that we can build that beloved community, one that is strong and decent, just and kind, one in which we can all see ourselves. That's the vision that our parents and grandparents fought for, the vision that made my own life possible, the vision that makes the American promise, for all its complexities and imperfections, a promise worth fighting for. So make no mistake, the road ahead is not easy. We may stumble. We may fall short. But I pledge to you that we will act boldly and deal with our challenges honestly. We will speak truths, and we will act with the same faith in you that we ask you to place in us. We believe that our country, all of us, will stand together for a better future. And we already are. We see it in the doctors, the nurses, the home health care workers, and frontline workers who are risking their lives to save people they've never met. We see it in the teachers and truck drivers, the factory workers and farmers, the postal workers and poll workers, all putting their own safety on the line to help us get through this pandemic. And we see it in so many of you who are working, not just to get us through our current crisis, but to somewhere better. There's something happening all across our country. It's not about Joe or me. It's about you. And it's about us. People of all ages and colors and creeds who are, yes, taken to the streets, and also persuading our family members, rallying our friends, organizing our neighbors, and getting out the vote. And we have shown that when we vote, we expand access to health care and expand access to the ballot box and ensure that more working families can make a decent living. And I'm so inspired by a new generation. You are pushing us to realize the ideals of our nation, pushing us to live the values we share: decency and fairness, justice and love. You are patriots who remind us that to love our country is to fight for the ideals of our country. In this election, we have a chance to change the course of history. We're all in this fight. You, me, and Joe, together. What an awesome responsibility. What an awesome privilege. So let's fight with conviction. Let's fight with hope. Let's fight with confidence in ourselves and a commitment to each other, to the America we know is possible, the America we love. And years from now, this moment will have passed, and our children and our grandchildren will look in our eyes, and they're going to ask us, where were you when the stakes were so high. They will ask us, what was it like? And we will tell them. We will tell them not just how we felt, we will tell them what we did. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
And there it is, history made tonight as Kamala Harris, the prosecutor turned attorney general turned United States senator, now is the first woman of color ever to be on a presidential ticket of the United States, paying tribute to the women of the past, as well as her mother, who she said, whose shoulders she stands on and taught her that service to others gives life purpose and meaning. Her mother immigrated from India to be a cancer researcher, her father, a Jamaican professor of economics. And now Joe Biden there to congratulate the woman he has chosen to run on the ticket with him and to try to become the 46th president of the United States. Jamal, there are no balloons dropping. This is a socially distanced, but nevertheless incredibly significant.
This is significant. I've got, my phone's blowing up with AKAs who are excited about this, their sorority. My wife is a Howard graduate and the daughter of Jamaican immigrants. She's in tears on my phone. So she's speaking, Kamala Harris, for a lot of people around the country who see in her rise something that is bigger than just her particular self. And including Barack Obama, who seemed to get a little choked up tonight when he was talking, because we talk about the Civil War as kind of the second founding of this country. The civil rights movement as a third founding. And so the question for a lot of people is, was that new foundation crumbling after Donald Trump got elected? And the hope that people have in her today and in Joe Biden in this election is that perhaps America can reclaim that progress to bringing everybody to participate and not excluding people.
Kamala joined on stage by her husband, Doug, who she points out she met on a blind date set up by a best friend, an attorney in his own right. And Maria Elena, she really tried to knit her own personal stories we talked about with the future and the hope, but also that message that young people, the next generation, has the power to affect this election.
And she's the exact example of that. I think in the last 3 days we realized, and today especially, we heard about Trump's flaws, we heard about Joe Biden's attributes, but today I think we understood who Kamala Harris is as a human. I think she humanized herself and she humanized Joe Biden, and I think people get, what they get out of this also is that they will really work together as a team, and that to them, family is first. So they are very relatable today, and maybe they didn't see them as politicians, maybe today they saw them just as human beings.
And that wraps up the third night of the Democratic National Convention. Special thanks to our panel and correspondents. Our coverage continues on our 24-hour streaming service, CBSN. You can watch it at cbsnews.com or on our CBS News app. There's going to be more on your local news on this CBS station, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow night when former Vice President Joe Biden accepts his party's nomination for President of the United States. For all of us at CBS News, I'm Norah O'Donnell. Good night.